Would you like to introduce yourself, or do you have any content you want to promote or anything like that?
I kind of getting started with the whole video production stuff. I do have a YouTube channel, and but I don't have any videos posted yet. But my goal with it is kind of like an independent media type journalism approach to kind of look at broad perspectives and promote more unity within society. Just kind of look
Okay.
at different topics and have interesting conversations with people.
All right, yeah, that sounds good. I think our goals are pretty closely aligned in that respect.
Yeah.
So I guess just look out for Natasha's content in the future. So first things first, then, what is your claim? What claim would you like to make?
So basically, on the general assumption of the concept of free will.
All right. And what specifically do you think about free will?
Um, I think that my knowledge on it, even though I've done some studies, I've kind of studied and researched it a little bit, but my general knowledge on it is more of like an intuitive approach to where um, just within the concept of free will, the moral obligation and responsibilities that we would have tied in with that based on our responsibility in society, based on that free will and kind of like how our actions are uh, chosen by us.
Okay, so would you say that you believe in free will then? Is that
I
something?
do. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any like nuance to that or any particular way that you want to word that in terms of your belief, or you just fine with saying I believe in free will?
I think that there's kind of two general definitions that come to mind for me. There's more of like the outwardly physical free will to where we are in control of our own actions and, and in control of like, if I'm going to raise my hand, that's, my free will to do so. But there's also kind of a metaphysical aspect of it to where, like within the concept of like spirituality or interdimensionally, that there's um, a free will that we have as the human species to where it's generally not like within the laws of nature able to be imposed upon.
Okay, all right. So then would you say that you are not a determinist, or would you say that you are also a determinist?
I think that it can be intermeshed a little bit. I do think that there is kind of like some sort of concept of destiny in it a little bit. But as far as the determinist approach where time is more linear or I guess relative to where like, the past, present, and future all happen at one time. I'm kind of sketchy on that concept. I generally like to believe that there's responsibility within our actions to promote those things to happen.
Okay, all right. So I think that the claim then, you can let me know at any point if I'm wrong. I will try to repeat you a lot, but the claim is essentially just that free will exists. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Okay. And I understand as well that um in your mind, the idea of responsibility and some other things come along with that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that are like important to society. But just to keep it simple, we'll go with free will exists. Free will
Yeah.
exists. Okay. So you've already told me a little bit about how you, I think, came to this conclusion. Some of it has to do with intuition. I'm wondering if you'd elaborate on what informed you that free will exists, or what information do you have that convinces you that free will exists?
I think for myself, it's more of a general observation of the different characteristics that we have in society. I can pretty clearly see that there's a lot of difference in a person's ability to consciously make good decisions or consciously make bad decisions, I guess. Or I guess if you want to generalize it in the term of evil and good as well. But and not only that aspect, but there's also I think a general I guess within the concept of looking for information as well. There's people who tend to let information come to them, and there's also the people who actively seek to find information. So I think that within that, just kind of like the difference in people that I see in society, just kind of to me really highlights our ability to really have good control over what we know. And then I think that like kind of for me ties into the aspects of free will and kind of where we want what we want our character to be, where we want our life to go, and where we determine ourselves to see fit in society.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. How confident would you say that you are that claim is true on a scale from 0 to 100?
I think based on my belief on the intermeshing of determinism, I think I'd probably set it at like an 89, 80, probably 88.
88. All right.
Yeah.
Great. And so again, you were talking about some of the things informing you that this is true. And then I apologize, I'm going to write intermittently just so that I know that I understand you correctly. But one is just general observation, right? So one of those things is people, in your view, consciously making good and bad decisions, right? And then people seeming to have some control over what they want in their lives or what they want their character to be. Is that correct as well?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering what would increase your confidence that this claim is true, and then also what would decrease it. So we can start with increase if you want. What would increase your confidence that the claim is true?
I mean, I guess if I haven't really, I have not really, I mean, I have researched the topic, but I have not in depth either researched or looked at any type of studies or data on it. So I think that if I might have had a little bit more of that knowledge, it could either sway it either way, depending on
Okay.
what it was.
So it's going to be true for both increasing and decreasing. Is some type of data or information that would confirm or disconfirm the idea to you to some degree.
Yeah.
Could you at all imagine what that would be, or do you think that would be difficult to do?
It'd probably be a little difficult. I think unless there was I don't see a lot of intuitiveness in society, in the general sense that I don't feel like a lot of people are able to really separate their self from ego. So I think that if I could possibly even do my own type of survey to talk to people about what intuitiveness means to them, and I've never even really spoke about the topic to anybody. So I think that if I could probably do that, even anecdotally, that would probably help.
Okay, what would you expect? Can you imagine what you would because you're talking about a survey now, so could you imagine what they might say in the survey or how they might respond that would cause you to think that maybe free will, or it would increase your confidence that free will exists or decrease it?
Um, I think if they could, I think if they were able to kind of define what uh, self awareness and intuition meant to them, kind of more directly in line with what my definition is, that would probably give me a little bit of like more of a controlled basis on, the reliability of a survey or, I guess, study data.
Okay.
But yeah, I feel like that there's not really much of a knowledge of what intuition really is. Not a really a knowledge, but it's kind of like a broad definition, right? Especially when you kind of factor in like different religions and things like that.
Okay. So I think that the idea is if you were surveying a bunch of people and you got the sense that their definition of self-awareness and intuition were similar to your own, um, and then maybe if they didn't have the experience of having free will, that would decrease your confidence. And if they had the experience of having free will, that would increase your confidence. Is that what it comes down to?
Yeah, I think that I think that in general, if you were to ask a lump sum of people if they believed in free will, they would obviously just immediately say yes it does because duh, I'm controlling this right now, this is my own decision. But I don't think that they would actually know what the actual definition and what the debate on it is actually, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it would be really based on what the study participants knowledge was on the actual free will.
Okay, okay, got you. And I think with that too, we might have just a conversation about definitions. What do you mean by free will, or what does free will mean to you?
Yeah, so I know that there's an aspect of the nature versus nurture type situation where um, our character is shaped by kind of our position in society and the things that just happen to us, I guess. But for me, my definition of free will in itself is just kind of um, that I guess, for example, that there's just like a lot. I think the word like determination can kind of be rolled into it. I don't think that somebody would be predisposed to be poor. I don't think that that's, I think that there's an aspect of free will in that you have the free will and you have the ability to change that situation. You have the ability to push ambition towards yourself. And then like also within the definition of freedom, I think that I think that freedom can be um, defined in a lot of different ways. But I think that a primary basis of freedom is freedom within the mind, and freedom of the knowledge of intuition that you are responsible for your own actions. So I really have a pretty big basis on that. I don't think that anybody is predisposed to poverty. At least in America, I guess it depends on where you are within the economy and win the world too. But if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I think it does. I think I'm getting a clearer picture. Give me 1 second here. I apologize. I have to. I don't know if I'm gonna get things in the background, but I'm gonna try to accommodate for as much as possible. I'm sorry. Okay.
It's okay.
So going back to your information, just your general observations, people consciously determining their character. So the idea here, I think, is the reasoning behind this that I think is going on here is that if people are consciously determining their characteristics, or it seems like they can, then free will exists. Is that kind of the reasoning there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so if you found out information that people weren't determining their character, like if there was some study, this is completely hypothetical, I don't know, but if we found out, for instance, that of all the people we surveyed, their character came down strictly to their genetics, let's say. They were a combination of the characteristics of their mother and father. Would this start to sway you on free will? Would this change your
A, li-
confidence in free will? Okay, a
a
little
little
bit.
bit. Yeah.
And so there was this other aspect of determining the direction of our lives, and I think that was going into what you were saying about um, poverty, or people having a certain income level and their ability to basically not be stuck in that situation, but to be able to give themselves some sense of direction on that issue. And so if that came down to, if we found out that that was largely determined by genetics, like if there was a study that came out that showed, again, this is completely hypothetical. I do not have any studies in my back pocket here. But let's say 99+% of people whose parents were poor, they were poor themselves. Would this start to decrease your confidence in the claim?
A little bit. Um, I think that, like I said, I think there is a little bit of an intermeshing. Um, I know that uh, I know that within the debate that um, there's the concept that I just lost what I was going to say.
All right, take your time.
I think within the debate, there's the acquisition of the divine knowledge that kind of sets yourself apart from others that who don't even understand really what the concept of free will is. So there's definitely, like, I think it's even in, like, I think that's kind of like the whole basis of Gnostic, is that there's like this knowledge that you have to come into. And I'm not like super versed on like theological things, but I think that that's like a Gnostic belief, is that there's like an intuitive knowledge that we're all supposed to kind of come into. Um, but I think that there is like a certain set. I think that there might be a certain set of people in society that might have to a lesser extent the free, like, how much free will that they actually have, and that their actions are more societal, and they do allow different things to influence the way they act. So I do think that there's a little bit of like an aspect that there's people who are more disposed to have a better grip on what actually free will is, not even really in the definition, but actually using it as an action. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand you. Um, People consciously determining their character. I'm looking back at your note on that. People consciously determining their character.
That's going
So,
to be more on the basis of like good and bad, making good decisions and bad decisions based on our desires,
okay. Um,
and acted and like not letting ourselves succumb to desires, and if it's a bad decision that we would make just to satisfy that desire, consciously making the decision not to do that thing.
okay. Yeah, because that was going to be related to my next question, which was going to be, how do we determine what a good or bad decision is? You mentioned desire. Is it strictly related to desire, or is there something else going on here?
um I think like for me intuitively, it's more along the basis of just like the goodwill of all people. If you can think of your decision as being like a direct impact to the greater good of society, I think that would probably be a good definition or a good point to go with. Um, you know, when defining if it's going to be good or bad, but I do think that that can be kind of pretty broad.
Okay, so if you're engaging in an action and you're not considering the impact that it has on broader society, does that make it good or bad or in between, amoral maybe? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think ethics and morality would kind of come into place, like depending on what the situation is. I think like the example that's kind of sticking out in my head is like a desire, like um, like sexual desires or lust. I think that there's kind of like a broad definition within that, especially if you're speaking on like if it's like within the significant other or if it's just like a more promiscuous type thing. So I think that there's kind of like a pretty if we're talking about the basis of free will, and then like how our desires can be categorized as good or bad. I believe that there's the aspect of temptation is a pretty and that's going to constitute our ability to make decisions based on our free will being present. Um, if you're actively resisting temptation, especially when it's in reference to like a sexual desire, if you're straying away or committing adultery, that's obviously bad, and we have the free will to choose to do so. So,
Okay, all right. So let's go back before you were mentioning that we need to kind of consider the goodwill of all humans. Am I getting
mhm.
that part correct? Okay. So if we have this temptation, um, let's say to commit adultery here, when you're talking about adultery, are you talking about sex outside of marriage? Or are you talking about um, like cheating? I'm wondering, I guess.
I think that it would probably be more of like whatever promises you've held to somebody who you're in exclusive with, or what
Okay.
their expectation of the relationship would be.
Okay. All right. So that changes the conversation a little bit then for me. Okay. So the idea is if you are being tempted to break a promise that you've made with somebody else in a relationship, the lack of consideration that you're giving that other person really comes down to you, that's a bad thing, correct?
Yes.
And that is playing a role in how you're viewing free will as this existent thing, the fact that you understand that that is something people can do or not do.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. That seems clear to me. I'm going to take just a slightly different approach here. Let's see, determining direction of our lives. Well, let me ask one final question on some of these things, and then I'm going to try a different approach that isn't exactly SE. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but um, so in terms of let's see, consciously determining their character. So if you found out that the development that our of our character and the determining of the direction of our lives came down to uh, at base, let's say, and again, I don't know any of this, so this is all just hypothetical, but physics and chemistry and biology, would that lower your confidence that free will exists?
Yeah, I think that if I was able to study it more, and I saw a general correlation within that debate, I would probably um, sway a little bit.
Okay. What about sociology? What if you found out that it was largely impacted by social circumstances? Would you say that would decrease your confidence, or would it not?
Not really, because I would have to have a general assumption that those people knew, um, kind of generally knew what they were talking about when they said it. Because it's really easy to to say obviously there's free will, because people think that they have control over what they do, but um, there are societal influences that I think do um, make a difference.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. Um, okay, so we'll try something else here. And again, this is an SE. So what I'm doing now, I'm stepping outside of the role of SE. So I'll go ahead and admit that. I will say that, and I haven't revealed this position at all yet to you, but I also believe in free will. I'm a compatibilist, so I believe in both free will and determinism. And I think ultimately we might disagree about what free will is, but we still agree that free will exists. And so I was going to share with you a study maybe you haven't heard of. I don't know. And I can't even remember the name at this point because it was a while ago that I studied it. But and maybe you've already heard of it. But the study about there is essentially they're monitoring someone's brain, and they are telling this person, there's like a little clock that they're watching, and they tell them to make a decision. I can't even remember what the decision is, and they've also done several different studies, but let's say they have to choose to raise their left or right hand. Okay, so they have to choose to raise their left or right hand, and then they have to time when they consciously made that decision. So they have you heard about this before?
Uh-uh.
Okay, so they have to note when they consciously made the decision. So, and they have a very specific like microsecond timer. Actually, I think it just gives them symbols. And what they found was, let's say somebody says, okay, I'm going to raise my right hand. Okay, and they note like I'm making the decision at X o'clock, right? And they monitor the brain. The brain actually signals what decision you're going to make there, and your brain signals that you've made that decision well before we seem to be aware that we've made the decision. And then, so this is one famous experiment that has been done that is used by some people who don't believe in free will to indicate that free will actually doesn't exist. And I guess I would wonder about your thoughts on that. What do you think about that? Does that sway you one way or another? Or I know you haven't looked at the study yourself, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot there, but on the surface of it, it's very intricate and in-depth, by the way. This is a very rudimentary explanation of that experiment.
Yeah. The brain signaled before they actually raised their hand.
Yes. The brain seemed to have made the decision before we ourselves as a conscious agent were aware that we made the decision. And I will also point out that this was highly indicative, but it wasn't completely either. So that's another thing too, was that it was effective like 87% of the time, which means there's 13% that it wasn't effective. But yeah, if you were choosing to raise your left or right hand, you say, I made it at 335 and 0.02 microseconds or something like that, or milliseconds. Your brain would indicate that you had really made it in some instances like a minute before. Your brain had already lighted up that, okay, he's going to raise his left hand now, and that person chose to raise their left hand. And I could find the name of the yes. Yeah, and so this is a real experiment that's been done and is talked about a lot when it comes, especially in the philosophy of free will. And I will also go on to say things like the experimenter himself, the person who did it, didn't think that this falsified free will in any way. And there's actually this idea of free won't that emerges from that experiment, which is another thing which was interesting, was that the brain activity would raise to a certain level in some people, but then would just completely stop. So it seemed like people had consciously made the decision to not do that thing. And so there's this idea of free won't now as well. But I'm wondering if that does change your confidence at all, or if it doesn't, if you think that you'd have to look into it more or something like that.
Yeah, that probably would immediately, yeah, it does. Uh, it does change my confidence. But I do have I would like to, I like how you are able to kind of give yourself a general category on like kind of like truly what you are within the free will debate. I would like to be able to research enough to kind of really see where I fall on the spectrum of that, because I can see how the brain would, because I think that there's also like the general um concept of consciousness in itself, right? Like kind of what sets us apart from other animal species. So it's just all super interesting to me. But yeah, that does sway my opinion a little bit.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think it changed mine initially too. Um, and I could also recommend some reading for you as well, because this is obviously a huge conversation.
Yeah.
Um, that's very hard to parse through. But the implications. Sam Harris is a huge. He's got a book on free will, and he's a huge, I guess, denier, you could say, of free will.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, he's a neuroscientist, and he's in contrast to Daniel Dennett, who's a compatibilist. But one of the implications that he points out here, which is pretty interesting, was that a scientist could write on a piece of paper, okay, I want you to determine, I want you to determine whether or not you want to raise your left or right hand. And they could write down on that piece of paper a minute before you're going to do it and be correct statistically a high amount, and just keep showing you that piece of paper. See, this is exactly what you were going to do, and know exactly what you were going to do it before you seemed to be aware that you knew you were going to do it.
Hmm.
And
That is
that's
quite interesting.
yeah. Um, but okay, all right. I think that's great, and I think I understand uh, your position to a high degree. I can't think of any other questions. Um, I think that was great. Yeah, I think that was really good. I guess I could finish by saying that um I guess for me it comes down to like will. Like I definitely have a will. I think I have this desire to do things, and I understand that someone can impede that will. That's what it usually comes down to for me.
Hmm.
Is that I know that it's just like I could desire to eat ice cream, and someone could physically stop me from getting the ice cream. And so it's just like, well, I have a will to eat the ice cream, but I'm not free to enact that will.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that
Yeah.
in that
One of the
sense.
examples that I had read was an example of somebody who has, I think it was called agoraphobia, and their will to want to go outside and relate with the public, and whether or not that the concept that he has, the agoraphobia, was predetermined in his will from, stemming from that. So that was kind of interesting too. But
And that's probably true for a lot of disorders as well. I would imagine disorders or
yeah,
fears.
yeah.
You
And that
may
would
have,
kind of come down to like the genetics thing that you kind of mentioned too, you know.
yeah,
So
and actually something else that now that I'm recalling, something else that's been brought up in studies, which I think is very interesting, is like they'll do twin studies. Have you heard of like the twin studies where they'll monitor two twins that have been split up at birth? So they're not in the same household at all. They're not even necessarily in the same state. And there's this high correlation between the decisions they make in life. Like for instance, a lot of them will choose similar or the same careers.
yeah. Well, I have looked quite a bit into the concept of morphic resonance. It is I believe it's Rupert Sheldrake.
Oh
And
yeah.
that is super interesting to me, kind of like within the depths of quantum entanglement and how our intentions and thoughts are imprinted into the cosmos to affect other people who might not even have any idea that, it's kind of where the process of inspiration kind of comes from a little bit for some people. But then again, I think that there's also that aspect of knowledge that a certain person has to have, because there are I know that I hear them categorized as like NPCs, non-playable characters, that just kind of go along with society and don't really have that intricate knowledge of divinity or don't want that knowledge. So I think it really depends on that, the certain person's knowledge of and beliefs they have in society too.
All right. Would you want to make and explore a claim around that, or would you not feel comfortable doing that, like morphic resonance, or even you've mentioned divinity a few times? I'm interested in that and want to know if you would want to explore that at all, or if you don't want to, or if you have a different claim.
Yeah,
Any
we
of
can
that?
explore that divinity
Okay.
or, kind of wrap it all up in one. Have you ever heard of resonance?
I've heard of Rupert Sheldrake mention that before and watched his TED Talk, which was banned on it. So yes, I'm familiar with his discussion on it. I can't say that I understand the ins and outs of it, but I am familiar with it.
I can't say that I'm an expert on it, but I have a little bit of knowledge on it. And then like divinity, um, I'm I'm not a religious person, but I do have an intricate feeling of God within myself. It's like kind of like in the same instance with free will. A lot of the things that I talk about in that aspect kind of are like more of intuitive and just I'm very in tune with my feelings and I'm very in tune with my uh I mean, I guess possibly to go down the line of like mental health or like on the basis of hypothetically thinking of somebody who's schizophrenic or somebody who has invasive thoughts. I i can't i could never relate to somebody like that because I'm so familiar with what my thoughts are and um I'm just so in tune with what my mind is supposed to be like or what it normally is, that like if I ever had like some sort of invasive thought, I would immediately not it would not be able to impose upon my free will, I guess, if that makes sense. I would never allow that to happen. So I mean that's kind
Got you. Got
of
you.